Yeah, so breaking news. The world has been gripped by an utterly irrational mass formation psychosis since 2020. And we now have firm evidence that the bumbling nobody in charge was just making it up as he went along. I'm referring, of course, to Matt Hancock, who is a smug, grinning turdoid, who used to work at the Bank of England doing data entry and found himself in the position of Minister of Health for the entire country.
He must have an excellent gag reflex.
Our Connor colleague is currently preparing a fuller discussion on these WhatsApp revelations, because I think they're due to come out over about 3-month period. So there's going to be quite a lot of these, and you can only imagine that what they've saved up ahead of us is going to get even worse. So Connor will be getting that into some detail, and of course Harry and Callum, you just covered it at the weekend, didn't you?
We mainly covered the headlines because the headlines were pretty telling in of themselves, although looking at the actual screenshots as well just goes to show the blithering buffoonery of the people who rule this country.
Yeah. So this is not so much going to be a sort of, covering it for the first time, doing it as a story segment. This is more going to be in reference to the sheer level of cope that people are having to deal with afterwards. And also, just on my part, a bit of an angry rant, because I'm still really pissed off about all of this and what they did to us for 2 years, so I want to get it out my system.
Always got a few angry rants up our sleeve, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely, especially for this. Now, before I do get into all of that, I'm just going to mention Premium Contemplations 113, The Limitations of Science, a slightly older one, but it is a good one for this topic, so I thought I'd mention that. You can find that on the website of the Lotus Eaters. Now, going back to the topic, let's give some context, shall we? So, since March 2020, basically the entire Western world was under this mass formation psychosis, and people have recently started to be coming around to it. Although I still see people wearing masks even now.
There may be 1 in 20, but there is still people out there doing it.
I actually saw somebody at the weekend walking through the woods wearing a mask.
Were they afraid the squirrels were going to cough at them?
I don't know. I can only hope they had some absolutely hideous facial disfiguration that meant they were sort of covering something up. Maybe some Siamese twin.
That would be the only
would have been
excusable
trying to start fighting
reason.
people or something going off their chin or whatever. But anyway, so yeah, you still see people who are falling for this, and that's really what I wanted to sort of cover, because back then people came to believe that a deadly virus which had escaped a level 4 biolab in China, the type where people wear those full body suits with their own oxygen supply, people came to believe that a virus that had escaped that environment could be stopped by cutting up an old T-shirt and wearing it around their face.
I remember for a while when it first started, I decided, screw it, I'm going to take the bandito look, and I just had a bandana that I just started wearing around my face just to make people around me feel very comfortable, and then I got scolded by people telling me that the multiple layers of fabric of the bandit mask that I was wearing, this bandana, was not enough, and instead I had to use the incredibly flimsy and thin face masks that we were being told would be much more effective. And honestly, that never made any sense to me.
I struggle with the fact that I'm part of the same species as people who genuinely somehow came to believe this stuff. I've also got a Brokenomics out later today at 3 p.m. with Professor Hector Drummond, where we demolish the face mask thing. He goes into some detail, so if you want to see the face mask science getting absolutely torn to shreds, tune in at 3 o'clock on the website of the Lotus Eaters and you'll see that takedown. So one of the major contentions of people like me at the time, and probably many of you viewers as well, is that the government, they were basically just making it up as they went along. They were stoking fear. I certainly had this thrown at me a lot. I actually had several Tory MPs call me a COVIDiot.
Specifically, or just in general?
No, me in particular, because this is when I started getting prominent on talking about these things. Piers Morgan called me badly misinformed.
Oh, that's interesting coming from him.
Kay Burley from Sky News decided to compare me to the sort of person who would slow down for a car crash because I was questioning her narrative on some of this stuff. So I certainly am one of those people who was getting it in the neck at the time because, it turns out I was right about bloody all of it, as these WhatsApp messages have proven. And what's changed recently? Well, this has come out since the weekend, since the segment you did, which is particularly interesting. So take a look at this. This is a conversation, one of these WhatsApp conversations. The particularly interesting thing to note here is, of course, the date, the 13th of December 2020. That comes into relation in a minute. And this part of the conversation about we need to frighten the pants off everybody with a new strain. And Matt Hancock is saying, when do we deploy the new variant? Now, one of the threads that I did at the time on this subject was that, with these viruses, they are not. It is not binary when you move from one state to another. It's not like 4 Lego blocks where you rearrange them and you've now got a new variant. It is a long string of proteins that are continuously evolving over time. And what you can simply do is you can look at it and you can say, right, well, I think there's been sufficient change that I'm now going to declare that this is a new variant, but it is basically a continuum. So you can pick anywhere on that continuum and you can declare that there's a new variant and use that to scare people.
So it's mainly arbitrary, is what you're saying there.
Yeah, well, entirely. Yeah, it's just when you've decided that there's sufficient grounds for giving it a new name. Now,
Time to panic.
yeah, quite. The 13th of December. That was when we received the Kent variant, which was called the British variant elsewhere in the world, but we called it the Kent.
I don't
variant.
even remember this one at that point.
Yeah, I mean there were so many of them, isn't it? It's just such a complete load of absolute shite. But that is that.
Family friendly.
The point is that those of us who question this stuff were absolutely right, and it has been proven beyond absolute fact at this point, and there's going to be a lot more of these coming out as well. Now let's start thinking about some of the harms that this did. I mean, here's an image of kids left out in the snow. I don't think that's from the UK, but this sort of thing did happen in the UK as well. This is just the first image that I found that met this sort of thing. My own kids in the schools in the primary school that they in. All through the winter, they left all the windows and doors open, sort of -4 degrees.
Oh,
and
lovely.
they had to sit there in their coats all day long because the staff had been propagandized by this sort of fear-mongering nonsense that we got out. And it wasn't just kids who were the victim of this. This is a Toby Young tweet about a business that was destroyed by this. They didn't buy into this bullshit either, and they were fined £42,000. It's been reduced a bit, but this is one example. There were many businesses who have not had prominent.
I mean, it says that they refused to comply with COVID restrictions in November 2020, which, if I remember correctly, was only 3 months after the government's Eat Out to Help Out scheme. So if they'd done so 3 months previously, they would have been given handouts from the government. But because they chose to do it in the winter, all of a sudden it's illegal.
Yeah, the absolute madness of this people of this period, and there were many other businesses destroyed, who simply just couldn't operate. Being closed for much of this sort of 2-year period, with the small exception of the Eat Out to Help Out bit. And I put together some compilations. So this is a compilation that I put together of the police acting like. Well, I won't say it, but here we are. I think that one on the left is German police arresting Santa Claus. Because,
literally arresting a symbol of childhood happiness.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back far enough into the lore of Santa Claus, he did start off as a German paedophile. I think that's where the story originated. So,
why would the police be going after him?
No, no, obviously the police wouldn't go after that sort of thing.
No.
Especially statute of limitations, and that's quite an old story. But anyway, so the thinking is that a thin piece of t-shirt that would protect you, but because he's wearing a big white fluffy beard. He needs to be arrested and put on the.
He's a carrier.
Yes,
Must have been.
Then we've got police harassing people on the beach. That could be Australia. That one. I mean, the Australian police went completely mad, didn't they? I think that's German police again, or maybe Austrian, or one of those whatever countries.
Do you remember? I think it was the Scottish police. They put out a photo on their Twitter of some area in Scotland of just a field, and just said, "Remember, we're watching wherever you are."
Oh, they were flying drones around and stuff, weren't they? In fact, I mean, we could do a whole segment on just the police response to this. It was complete madness. In one area, they dyed a lake like a blue colour. No, was it? It was naturally a blue colour, and they dyed it purple or something to stop people going to have a look at it, because they wanted to stop people going outside.
I mean, if you couldn't describe to me cartoonishly evil in one image, and that's that.
Well, quite. So yeah, much respect.
Were they also going around on that one in the middle on the beach? Were they also kicking over the sand castles? I assume.
Well, and they were doing that as well. They were filling in skating parks and all the rest of it, weren't they? And then, of course, the iconic image on the right of Canadian police, Canada being the home to tolerance and communism, of course, riding over a elderly Indian woman
for her own health.
Yes, on a mobility scooter with a horse, because there was some sort of reason they gave at the time, and I forget what it was now. So it wasn't just police acting like this. Here are some wedding photos, which I've decided to pick on. So on the left, we've got two complete couple of nodders.
At least they went the extra mile to decorate the masks for the occasion.
Yes.
Also, I don't know if these people were aware of what was expected of them on a wedding night, but they are going to have to get somewhat more intimate than that.
Yes, quite. Look, they're going to be looking at these wedding photos for the next sort of 30 or 40 years. I mean, well, divorce rates notwithstanding.
Well, I mean, if these two people ended up doing that, I'm not holding out hope for the marriage.
So they're going to be looking at wedding photos like that for decades to come, where they look like complete Burks because they bought into the nonsense at the time. And just to illustrate the point of what wedding photos are supposed to look like, I included one of my own wedding photos on the right, where I got married on a battleship because... Of course I did.
Are you just dunking on the audience now?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I honestly, I don't understand people who get married in churches. Have churches ever fired on the enemy?
Well, I mean,
I don't
probably.
think so. You show me a church that has 3 confirmed U-boat kills and put 2,000 rounds into German defences on D-Day. That's where I got married, HMS Belfast. So that's what your wedding photos are supposed to look like, and they are not supposed to look like that absolute tragedy.
I mean, my friends live on the Channel Islands, so I'll ask them if there's any churches down there that can fulfil your qualifications.
Well, I'm hoping not to do it again, unless you annoys me or something. But I should watch these. Right, quickly move on to the next one.
Quickly.
The next photo is just knobbers in general. There were so many images that we could choose from this period of absolute madness. So there's a priest using a water bottle to baptise the baby,
holding up that family, I assume.
There we've got somebody who watches the TV and has taken it seriously. And I mean, all of these people are TV.
Those tubes aren't even 6 meters.
Yeah,
I mean, he looks like an actual dickhead.
Yes. And, there were surprisingly many examples of people wearing pool noodles on their head. There was one cafe that made a whole bunch of people do it. And, of course, people walking in the woods in whatever setup that is. And, I was so spoilt for choice when it came to pictures of people being ridiculous about all of this.
The year before all of this went down in 2019, I lived in Salford, and one time I went to the local supermarket in Salford, and there was these people wandering about. I don't know what was wrong with them, if they were just hypochondriacs in full hazmat suits, and I can only assume they were just ahead of the curve.
Well, what was wrong with them is they were TV watchers. That must have been it.
Probably.
Yeah.
Quite. I'm shocked as well that you've not included my favourite images from the whole thing of the entire. I think it's a jazz band or an orchestra where they're all playing their images in little plastic boxes, and they're wearing their masks, but the masks have slits cut through them so they can get.
Yes.
It's so stupid. These people, like you say, these people have got photographic evidence of how retarded they are that they can look back on for the rest of their life and with shame.
Yes,
hopefully.
You won't find any photographic evidence of me in a mask, I can promise you that. But it wasn't just people being hilariously stupid. Let's cut to a slightly sadder tweet of mine. There were other responses to the pandemic, which I won't name on this website, but this is a young woman.
An image paints 1,000 words, right?
Yeah, 21 years old, who had a heart condition, and she was told that despite of the fact that it would almost certainly cause significant harms, that she should participate in that response to the COVID thing that we won't talk about, and it had the predictable response of causing catastrophic injuries to her legs, and she now looks like this.
I will say, without naming any specifics, that I also have met somebody who had certain complications that as a result of which they were one of, I think, 8 people in the country to have confirmed to have developed cancer because of it, which is pretty awful to learn.
That we know. I mean, I know somebody.
Yes,
as well.
that we know of.
I know somebody who. I mean, she wasn't a professional runner, but she was very near it. She was one of those people who was a really good runner. You'd see on Strava all the time, posting these amazing times. And she participated in this aspect of the COVID response, and she lost 30% of her lung tissue due to blood clots. Spent months in hospital. She's out now, and she's, I say, running again, but I see her times on Strava, and for those of you who are listening to the podcast rather than watching it, I am a fat old man, and yet I can easily outrun her. It's this. I mean, and she was an absolute sort of champion. So this is very sad. We don't know the full extent of the rare complications associated with this aspect of the pandemic, but people were hurt. Now, that's just what happened to us here in the Western world, the response, so the effect in the developing world was utterly demonic. So the UN put out a report, and they were able to calculate that 100 million people were pushed into poverty by lockdowns. Because, of course, when Western world shuts down supply chains and shuts down normal business, that has a ripple effect out to the rest of the world. Western world started bidding up things like energy and food supplies, which became more rare. Which basically resulted in making sure that the flow to the Western world was uninterrupted while these knock-on effects were taking effect. But it meant that the developing world did get squeezed out. So 100 million people were pushed into poverty around the world by the lockdowns. And this is a number that I want you to sear into your mind. That same report concluded that 283,000 children starved to death as a direct result of lockdown. So let me say that again. 283,000 children died as a direct result of lockdown from starvation.
And when did this report come out?
Oh, this was maybe about a year ago now. I forget the time, but it was a UN report that came out. And they also concluded that a further 6.7 million were basically malnourished as a result of this, and that malnourishment will be causing them health problems for the rest of their life.
And I don't see Kay Burley or anybody continually
none
bringing
of them
this
care.
one up.
None of them care. So, and this is all because in the Western world, people like Matt Hancock thought they knew best, and they thought that they got it best. And when they realised that they had made a mistake, they doubled down because they wanted to avoid looking like they'd made a mistake. And these leaks, these WhatsApp messages that we're seeing now, they knew that they were peddling complete and utter bullshit, and yet they went ahead and did it anyway. They trampled freedoms, they destroyed businesses, they ruined lives, they cost lives, as we've seen here. They denied people the comfort of being with their friends and family in their final moments. People, including young children, died in hospital without their family next to them because the staff at these hospitals were terrified to let people in because scumbags like Matt Hancock had frightened them with stuff that they knew simply wasn't true. I'm going to refer you now and to the Terrorism Act 2000, because as far as I'm concerned, Matt Hancock is a terrorist. So this you can find on the gov.uk website if you type in Terrorism Act 2000. I'm looking here at Section 1, the definitions, and I'm just going to read a little bit of what the definition of terrorism is for you. It says, in this act, terrorism means the use or threat of actions where the use or threat is designed to influence a government or intimidate the public.
Sounds like a bit of both to me.
Yeah, it is precisely. He did precisely both of these things. Further, this section goes on to explain the action falls within this subset if it involves serious violence against a person. Well, I've shown you people with serious injuries. If it involves serious damages to properties, well, yes, many businesses were utterly destroyed by this. If it endangers people's life, other than the person committing the action. Yes, because Matt Hancock was fine. Matt Hancock was attending parties. He was seeing his mistress.
Yeah, he was having an affair.
He was having a great time. He was enjoying himself immensely, as you can tell from the
I
tone
don't
of
think
these
he was
messages.
well endowed enough to be able to maintain 6 feet distance.
No, certainly not. Maybe -2.5 inches, but that would be about it. And further, the act says create serious risk of the health and safety of the public. Well, delayed cancer diagnoses. Record NHS waiting lists, the people who killed themselves through the stress and anxiety this caused.
Almost 300,000 children starved across the globe.
Yep, all of that as well.
And I know that you're going to get onto this by the time we get to the end of this segment, but I think as well, you're being you're not being ambitious enough by just saying Matt Hancock here, because it is very, very convenient that all of the leaks seem to point only directly towards Matt Hancock being the instigator of much of this.
Very, very true. Yes, I absolutely. Yes,
also, very suspicious that Matt Hancock himself was supposedly the person who leaked it to Isabel Oakeshott. There's obviously some manoeuvring going on behind the scenes.
I mean, that raises an interesting question. Is Matt Hancock the fall guy? And look, he would make a great fall guy because he's currently an independent MP. He's not in the Tories anymore.
Everybody already hates him.
Yeah, quite. I mean, he got kicked out of the Tories a few months back because he wanted to go on some celebrity jungle thing TV program.
Which was, I assume, supposed to be his managerially sponsored punishment.
Well, it's because he's so deluded that he actually thought that he could be prime minister and that he needed to boost his public image by going on this game show, and that by doing that he could be prime minister one day. And that's
if I eat some horse testicles on live television, all is forgiven.
Is that what they do? Oh dear.
I'm a Celebrity, I believe so, or camel testicles or something.
So
he was guzzling balls of some kind.
And because he was rushing off on this jungle thing, he handed over all of these messages to Isabel Oakeshott, the journalist who was writing his memoirs for him, ghostwriting his memoirs for him. And when she saw them, she decided that actually she was going to break the MDA. She was going to take the legal fallout that came with that, and she's going to publish them because, well, quite frankly, I think she did the right thing. But there are those people who think that he's being set up as a fall guy, and I agree with that. I think he is, because the Telegraph is basically happy to make it all about him, because by making it all about him, what they're not doing is they're not focusing on the other government ministers who are equally culpable, but they want to retain access to get interviews and comments from the rest of the ministers. So it looks like it's sort of all largely falling on Matt Hancock. And there are also those people I've seen online who are making the suggestion that this is all being done to further public support for the WHO, the World Health Organization bill that's going through at the moment, would transfer power to operate pandemics to the WHO.
I've covered that a few times. You can find those on the podcast if you go on the channel.
I don't personally put too much stock in that, because I think what these revelations show is that nobody should have had these powers, let alone some unaccountable body, because it's worth bearing in mind that the WHO still believe that the pandemic is going on.
Well, that paper and other such legislation, as far as I see it, is basically just a legalised formalisation of what already happens and what is already going on.
Right, okay. So people should, including me, should check out those segments that you've done on that. Because
I would recommend it, yes.
Absolutely. But I'm going to refer to how it felt back in 2000. This is a tweet that I quite like. That was exactly how it felt back in 2000. I'm sure a lot of people watching this podcast today can empathise with that character at the front. You had to stand up to a lot of people and saying, yes, you were all wrong. And I'm sure there'll be even more of you watching this who will say to yourself, well, actually, I was probably in the crowd as well. But at least I recognise where we are now on this.
For a time, I have to admit that I also was in the crowd for a little bit. But then as soon as it got to around the eat out to help out, and then unlike many others, I have certain pattern recognition skills which seem to be dying out these days. I started to notice every bit of information the government is giving us is contradictory. And now I know people personally who've had COVID firsthand. I know that it doesn't seem to be anywhere near as severe as they're making it out to be.
Yeah, anybody with basic pattern recognition will recognise quite quickly that we were only being lied to. However, not everybody has got that memo, which is the main thrust of this segment, really. So here's a poll from YouGov, where basically 71% of it, if you add up the response. So basically the question here is, in hindsight, do you think the government's handling of COVID-19 outbreak was generally, and 71% of people have said that it was either not strict enough or about right. Very disappointing that so many people should think that. I will point out that YouGov is basically more of a gaslighting operation than a polling.
YouGov is not the most trustworthy organisation.
No, I actually met the people who founded it, because YouGov is, well, at least it used to be owned by Naheem Zawahiri, who was the government's vaccine minister for many years, and a couple of other guys. I know I met them about 20 years ago. They came to me wanting money.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When they were trying to start up.
That must have been a difficult experience for you.
He's
still recovering now.
They're quite affable chaps, but I mean, they're explaining their methodology to me and saying, basically what we do is we select people to participate in these surveys.
Well, from what I've heard as well, I think Callum covered it back when everybody started to notice, hold up, 71% seems to be the sweet spot number for YouGov polls, that a lot of people who they've probably gathered information on from previous responses to other surveys, they don't get sent the emails out if it's a particular survey.
Because they build a profile on the people who respond to the surveys. So by simply selecting who they send it to, they can pretty much guarantee the result that they're going to get in advance. And this is one of the questions that I put to them about 20 years ago. And they sort of, gave me that sort of look that implies, well, it couldn't possibly, but, and then gave me all the right guff about, oh, no, our methodology is designed to be blah, 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 blah. But yeah, absolutely, that's bloody well what they do. I didn't invest in them, by the way, but they seem to have done all right anyway. So, so that YouGov poll is suggesting that an alarmingly large amount of people seem to think that actually the government did get it right when there was just incontrovertible evidence that they got it completely wrong. And this is a tweet that I put out because the intelligentsia is really suffering from a bad case of cope on this. So you've got sort of economists and barristers and opinion setters all basically trying to say that yes, these revelations basically show that we were completely wrong, but actually we weren't because of reasons. It's. I mean, well, you can read them at your leisure, but basically, there's a whole bunch of people out there at the moment desperately trying to justify why they were not in fact wrong. That's Andrew Linko, who made a complete fool of himself at the beginning by basically swathing himself, his family, and his shopping in Dettol every time they came back into the house for quarantining food for 3 days and all the rest of it. He's now trying to explain that there was nothing wrong with it. I like this quote from Thomas Sowell. People will forgive you for being wrong, but they will never forgive you for being right, especially if events prove that you were right while proving them wrong. That is exactly what the Western world is going through at the moment, and we're going to have to come to terms with this. So, that is all. That is all very sad. But we've got to this situation. This is effectively, this is, I think, a domino falling. Now, Matt Hancock, he is a terrorist. I've shown you that he meets all the qualifications for a terrorist. What they did to us was utterly reprehensible. I needed to speak out on this issue because it upsets me so much. Upsets me what they did to people, what they did to children, what they did to businesses, the harms that they put on people, the missed cancer diagnosis, not to mention the 283,000 children that they starved to death doing all of this. So
it is very important that we don't let this slip from public memory.
And I know that Matt Hancock is currently being set up as the fall guy. I say, take him. Take him down. Let's book that win, and then don't give up there. Let's carry on to the rest of the people who perpetrated this on us. But, I'm more than happy to take down Matt Hancock, who is this, smug idiot.
I mean, we've got texts included in these leaks showing that Boris was looking at the data, coming to the conclusions that many of these supposed anti-vaxxers, like yourself and myself, were coming to, and then went ahead with everything that was advised to him.
At the very least, I mean, Boris has had an easy ride on this so far, but at the very least it proves that he was a very weak man who should not have been Prime Minister because he couldn't stand up to, well, obvious nonsense that even he could see through. Matt Hancock, we're coming for you, and we're coming for all the rest of you as well.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast or the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Epoch series, this one on historical financial crises. If you'd like to find out what else Lotus is putting out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.